This is the story of a disturbing true house party horror story I'm going to tell you. And I swear, every time I think about it, I get chills down my spine. It didn't happen to me, but to someone I know. Danny, a friend from college. And after you hear what happened to him, you'll think twice before going to any random house party ever again. It all started one cold October weekend just a few days before Halloween. You know how it is. College kids, loud music, cheap drinks, someone's cousin knows someone who's throwing a party in the next town. That's exactly what happened. Danny and his friends were invited to a house party by a guy named Tyler. Nobody really knew Tyler that well, but he was always hanging around campus, seemed cool enough, and he told them it would be the party of the year. The party was set in a big, old house outside the city, kind of hidden behind trees. It was one of those houses that looks like it could be in a horror movie. 2 stories, creaky porch, paint peeling off the sides, and barely any streetlights nearby. But of course, none of that mattered. They were college kids looking for fun, and the moment they pulled up, they saw lights flashing inside, loud music shaking the windows, and a crowd already dancing in the yard. Danny, his girlfriend Lila, and 2 of their friends went inside ready to drink and dance the night away. At first, everything was normal. People were laughing, music blasting, and drinks being passed around like candy. But Danny told me something felt weird almost immediately. It wasn't the people or the music. It was the house itself. He said he felt like the house was watching him. I know that sounds strange, but that's exactly how he described it. He felt watched, even when he was surrounded by people. Then, things started getting off. Danny said around midnight, the music suddenly stopped. Just like that. No warning. Everyone went quiet for a second, kind of confused. Then the lights flickered. A few people laughed, thinking it was a joke or part of the party. But when the lights came back on, something was different. There were fewer people in the room. Danny swore there were about 40 people when they arrived. But now, the room felt half full. He looked around, trying to spot Lila and his friends, but they were gone. He figured they just went to the kitchen or stepped outside, so he grabbed another drink and waited for the music to start again. But it didn't. Instead, Tyler, remember, the guy who invited them, stood on the staircase and said in a loud voice, "Upstairs is open now." That's all he said. Just that. A bunch of people cheered like they were waiting for it. They rushed up the stairs like it was a race. Danny hesitated. Something about it felt wrong. But then he thought maybe it was just a VIP room or some themed part of the party, and curiosity got the best of him. So he followed them. The upstairs was dark, with just a red light glowing at the end of the hallway. Each door they passed was closed, except one. People were walking into that open room at the end, but strangely, no one was coming out. Danny stepped in line behind the others, and when he got close, he peeked inside the room. And what he saw, man, I still remember his face when he told me this. The room was empty. No furniture, no decorations, nothing. Just this huge black circle drawn on the wooden floor. People were standing around it in a circle, staring at it like they were in a trance. Tyler stood in the middle, smiling, his eyes looking wild. Danny didn't even enter the room. He said the air felt thick, like it didn't want him there. He backed up and turned to find Lila. But now the hallway was empty. Everyone had either gone inside or disappeared. That's when the screaming started. It came from inside the room. Loud, panicked, screaming, like someone was being hurt. Danny turned around and saw the people in the circle now writhing, like they were being pulled down. Their bodies were jerking in strange, unnatural ways. Some were crying. Some were just standing still with blood dripping from their eyes. Tyler, he was laughing. Not normal laughter. That high-pitched, creepy kind of laugh that sounds like it doesn't belong in this world. Danny ran. He bolted down the stairs, yelling for Lila and his friends. The house looked different now. All the lights were off, and the front door was gone. Like it had never been there. He heard whispers in the walls, actual voices whispering his name. Cold air brushed his neck even though the windows were shut. He ran into the kitchen, and for a second, he thought he saw someone standing in the corner, staring at him with no eyes. Just two black holes. He blinked, and it was gone. He tried every door and window, but nothing opened. Then he remembered the basement. He didn't want to go down there, but what choice did he have? He opened the basement door and a smell hit him, like rotting meat and burnt wood. He held his breath and went down, step by step. It was pitch black except for a candle flickering in the middle of the room. What he saw around the candle made him nearly vomit. Photos, dozens of them. Pictures of the people at the party. Only they were all dead in the photos. Some looked drowned, some burned, some twisted in ways no human body should be. And right there, in the center, was a photo of Danny, still alive, but his eyes were blacked out. He heard a voice behind him whisper, "You shouldn't have come." He turned, and Tyler was standing there, face pale, eyes pitch black, grinning like the devil himself. Danny doesn't remember what happened after that. He woke up the next morning in his own bed, clothes torn, body bruised, and a deep scratch down his back. Lila and the others? No one remembered the party. They thought Danny made it all up. They said they went to a bar and came home early. No big deal. But here's the thing. Danny had that photo, the one with his eyes blacked out. He found it in his pocket the next morning. And the house? When he tried to go back, it wasn't there. Just an empty lot, like it never existed. So yeah, that's the story of the most disturbing house party I've ever heard of. Believe it or not, I don't blame you if you think Danny imagined it all. But I saw that photo with my own eyes, and every October, around the same date, he gets new scratches on his back. Just don't go to parties thrown by people you barely know. You never know what kind of house you're walking into. This is the story of a disturbing true house party horror that I'm going to tell you. It's one of those stories that makes you question everything you know about normal life. You'll hear it, and part of you will want to laugh it off as a bad dream. But the rest of you, you'll be uneasy for days. It's not a story you can easily forget. This happened to my friend Matt, a guy I met a couple of years ago when I moved to the city. We worked together at a cafe, and Matt was one of those guys who always had an interesting story to tell. But the one he told me that night still haunts me. It started on a Friday. Matt had just finished work and was looking to unwind. He and a few of his friends were invited to a party thrown by a guy named Ben. Ben was known around the city, throwing parties, hosting events, always at the center of the social scene. Matt had never really spoken to him, but Ben was friends with some of Matt's old pals, so when the invite came, he decided to go. It was supposed to be a casual night out. They all piled into Matt's car, excited for a night of drinking and hanging out. The address Ben had sent them was in a quiet neighborhood, a little far from the downtown area. The houses in that part of town were big, old, and sometimes looked like they had stories of their own to tell. But Matt didn't think much of it. It was just a party, right? They pulled up to the house around 9 p.m. It was a large two-story place with lights on every floor and music spilling out into the street. People were already hanging out in the yard, chatting, laughing, and holding drinks. Nothing seemed out of place at first. Matt and his friends walked inside, joining the crowd. At first, the party was everything you'd expect. Loud music, people dancing, and everyone having a good time. Ben was easy to spot in the middle of it all, wearing a big grin, talking to everyone who passed by. Matt made his way through the crowd, looking for a drink, and found himself chatting with a guy named Kyle, a friend of Ben's. Kyle was the kind of guy who always had a joke ready and seemed to know everyone. He told Matt that this was going to be the best party of the year, that Ben always went all out for his events. But as the night wore on, things started to take a strange turn. Around midnight, the music suddenly stopped. It wasn't like the usual fade out from a DJ setting. It just cut off, and for a moment, there was complete silence. People looked around, confused. Then a slow, low hum began, coming from somewhere deep in the house. The crowd started murmuring, and Matt felt a chill run through him. The hum didn't feel right. It wasn't the kind of sound you'd expect at a party. Ben appeared on the staircase, and when the crowd saw him, they all went quiet. Matt said there was something about Ben that didn't feel normal. His smile was wide, too wide, and his eyes seemed too bright, like he was glowing. He stood there for a moment before raising his arms in the air, asking everyone to gather in the living room. "All right, everyone," Ben said, his voice strange and almost robotic. "The real fun's about to start." Matt and his friends exchanged looks, unsure of what he meant, but they followed the crowd into the living room. When they walked in, they noticed something strange. The furniture in the room had been moved, and in the center of the floor was a huge rug. It was dark red, almost black, with intricate symbols woven into the fabric. Some of the people who had been hanging out before were now standing in a circle around the rug, their faces blank, staring at the ground. Ben stood at the center of the circle and motioned for everyone to join in. "Don't be shy. This is the best part of the night," he said, his voice still odd, distant. Matt hesitated, but Kyle, who had been laughing and joking just a few minutes ago, was already stepping forward, nodding at him. "Come on, man," Kyle said. "You've got to see this." Something in Matt's gut told him to leave. He didn't know why, but something felt off about the whole situation. But he didn't want to be rude, so he stepped into the circle, joining the others. They all stood there awkwardly, waiting for something to happen. And then it did. A cold wind swept through the room, though all the windows were shut. The lights flickered. Ben began to chant something, his voice growing louder, deeper, like he was saying words from a language Matt didn't recognize. The air felt thick, heavy, like it was pressing in on them. Matt felt a sharp pain in his chest, like the very air was turning toxic. Suddenly, the rug began to move. It shifted slightly, and a low growling sound filled the room. The people around Matt seemed to ignore it, their eyes locked on the rug as if in a trance, but Matt couldn't look away. His eyes were drawn to the center of the rug, where a dark shape started to rise up. It was hard to explain, but it was like a shadow. But it wasn't just a shadow. It was a presence, a feeling that something ancient, something dangerous, was pulling itself into the room. The room began to spin. Matt grabbed the nearest wall to steady himself, but it felt like the walls were closing in. People were whispering now, their voices hushed and reverent, their eyes wide with fear. Ben wasn't smiling anymore. His face had twisted and his eyes were black, pure black. "Get out," Matt whispered to Kyle, shaking him. But Kyle was frozen, his eyes blank, his mouth open in shock. The air grew colder, and Matt could see his breath. The shadows around the rug seemed to move, swirling faster and faster, and then a voice echoed through the room, deep, guttural, like it was coming from beneath the earth itself. "Leave. Now." Matt didn't hesitate. He shoved his way through the circle, knocking over a few people as he rushed to the door. He didn't care about the others, didn't care about the party. All he cared about was getting out of that house before whatever that thing was, whatever Ben had unleashed, got a hold of him. He didn't stop running until he was out of the house and into the street. The air outside felt warm and normal, and, for a moment, he thought it was all just some kind of twisted prank. But when he looked back at the house, he saw something that froze his blood. Ben was standing in the window, staring out at him, his face still twisted in that terrifying grin, eyes glowing like flames. Matt didn't go back to the house. He called the police the next day, but when they arrived, the house was empty. No sign of the party, no sign of Ben or anyone else who had been there. It was like the house had vanished. There wasn't even a trace of the rug or the strange symbols. Most unsettling part? Matt swears he saw the same face in the window a few nights later, staring at him from across the street. Ben was gone, but the fear was not, and it never truly left Matt. So yeah, that's the story of a house party that took a turn into something far darker than any of them could have imagined. I'll leave you with this. There are some parties you shouldn't go to. You might think, it's all fun and games, but sometimes what's lurking beneath the surface is something you can't even begin to understand. This is the story of a true house party horror that I'm going to tell you, and I promise you, you won't look at parties the same way again. It's the kind of thing that makes you think twice about who you trust and where you go when the music is loud and the drinks are flowing. This one involves my friend Sarah, and trust me, it's not a story you want to miss. It all started a few months ago. Sarah, an old college friend of mine, had been invited to a party by a guy named Luke. Now, Sarah wasn't the type to go to wild parties. She was more into quiet nights with a book or hanging out with close friends. But Luke had a reputation. He was popular, charming, and he could throw a party that would make the whole town talk. When Sarah got the invite, she thought it'd be fun to let loose for once. She hadn't seen a lot of her old friends from college recently, and Luke was a familiar face, so she figured it would be a nice chance to reconnect. The house Luke rented was on the edge of town, up a quiet street with tall old trees lining the road. The place itself wasn't particularly fancy, but it had a certain eerie charm to it. It was the kind of house that looked like it had been there for decades, with creaky floors and dim, narrow hallways. Still, it had an inviting warmth about it, at least on the outside. Sarah arrived around 9:30 p.m., and the moment she stepped through the door, the music hit her. It was loud, pulsing beats that made the floor vibrate. People were everywhere, spilling out onto the balcony, crowded around the living room, some dancing, others sitting around chatting or laughing. Luke was at the center of it all, like a magnet that pulled people in. "Hey, Sarah!" Luke waved as he spotted her. He had a glass in his hand and was grinning, his eyes shining with excitement. "You made it!" Sarah smiled back, feeling a little out of place but deciding to go with it. She grabbed a drink from the counter and joined the crowd, chatting with a few familiar faces. As the night wore on, she started to relax. She was having a good time, but something was nagging at her, a feeling she couldn't shake. She couldn't put her finger on it, just a general sense that something was a little off. Around midnight, things started to get stranger. The music suddenly shifted. One moment it was the latest pop hits, and the next it was dark, eerie music. Deep beats with unsettling strings that made the air feel heavy. The lights dimmed, the atmosphere turning darker and more tense. Sarah found herself standing near the kitchen, looking around the room. People were still mingling, but the laughter didn't sound as genuine anymore. There was something different about the way everyone moved. "Hey, come on," Sarah heard Luke's voice behind her. She turned to see him, still smiling, but with something odd in his eyes. "You've got to come upstairs. There's something you need to see." Sarah hesitated. "Upstairs? What's up there?" Luke's grin widened. "Trust me, it's part of the fun. Come on, I'll show you." Something in the back of her mind told her not to go. She almost said no, but curiosity got the better of her. She followed Luke through the crowded living room, up the narrow staircase, and down a dim hallway to a door at the end. The air upstairs felt cooler, the lights flickering as they moved down the hall. There was a strange smell, like old wood and something else, something metallic. When Luke opened the door, Sarah was taken aback. The room was large, decorated with vintage furniture, but it was also cluttered. Clothes strewn on the floor, strange symbols painted on the walls, and a large rug in the center of the room. On the rug was a table, and on that table was an ornate black box, the kind that looked like it belonged in an old museum. It was covered in intricate carvings, and the moment Sarah laid eyes on it, she felt an unexplainable chill down her spine. "What is this?" Sarah asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Luke turned to her, his eyes now glowing unnaturally bright. "It's part of the game," he said, his tone suddenly serious. "You have to participate to fully experience the party." Sarah felt her heart race. "What do you mean by the game?" But Luke didn't answer. Instead, he stepped to the side, gesturing for her to come closer. "You'll understand once you touch it," he said softly. Against her better judgment, Sarah stepped forward. As soon as her fingers brushed the surface of the box, she felt a sharp sting in her hand, like an electric shock. She jerked back, but the damage was already done. The room seemed to shift, the walls pressing in on her. She looked around, but no one was there anymore. Luke was gone. She was alone. Then, the door slammed shut behind her. She turned quickly, but the room was now completely different. The rug was gone, and the symbols on the walls were glowing, pulsing with an eerie light. The box on the table was gone, replaced by something else. A dark shape in the corner, barely visible but undeniably there. She backed up against the wall, trying to steady her breathing. "What the hell is happening?" she whispered to herself. Her eyes darted around the room, but nothing made sense. The house was no longer the place she had entered. It was something else entirely. Suddenly, she heard a voice, a whisper so soft it was almost inaudible. "Sarah, come closer." Her heart pounded in her chest. She didn't want to go closer. She wanted to run, but something in the voice, something in the air, told her she had no choice. Reluctantly, she moved forward, her footsteps echoing in the empty room. She reached the corner where the shape stood, her eyes wide with terror. As she reached out to touch it, the darkness swirled, and for a brief moment, She saw something. A face, pale and distorted, grinning back at her. "Get out." A voice screamed from somewhere. It wasn't Luke. It wasn't anyone she recognized. It was a voice she didn't understand, but it was full of raw, primal fear. "Leave before it takes you too." But it was too late. The wall seemed to close in on her. The door, once solid, had disappeared. She was trapped. The face in the corner grinned wider, the darkness swallowing her whole. She couldn't breathe. Her lungs felt heavy, suffocated by the air. The last thing she remembered was the whispers growing louder, drowning out everything else. The next thing Sarah knew, she was lying on the floor of the room, gasping for breath. She didn't know how long she had been there, or what had happened. But when she stood up, the house was silent. There were no partygoers, no music, just emptiness. She ran out of the house as fast as she could, not stopping until she reached her car. She didn't look back. When she finally reached safety, she turned on her phone to call the police. But the phone wouldn't connect. The battery was dead. The next morning, Sarah tried to reach Luke. No response. When she called the number again, the phone just rang and rang. Eventually, she went back to the house, but it was gone. Completely gone. There was no sign of it, no trace that the house ever existed. Sarah never spoke to Luke again, and she never went to another party. That night changed her, and she wasn't the only one who felt the effects. The memories of that place, that house, stayed with her, and sometimes when she's alone, she swears she can hear those whispers calling her name. So yeah, that's the story of Sarah's party experience. The kind of party you don't walk away from. And I guess you could say, some houses are better left unexplored. This is the story of a house party gone wrong, one that no one talks about anymore. It's the kind of thing that people sweep under the rug because they don't want to face the truth. But I'm going to tell you about it anyway. About how my friend James got mixed up in something that changed his life forever. James was always the life of the party. He was that guy who could charm anyone, get anyone to laugh, and make the dullest events feel like a celebration. I met him in college, and we hit it off instantly. He had this easygoing, infectious energy that made him a popular figure on campus. So when he invited me to a house party at his friend's place in the suburbs, I figured it would be just another fun night out. I remember the day clearly. It was a Friday, the end of a long week, and the last thing I wanted was to stay in. James had called me earlier, all excited about the party, saying it was going to be the one to remember. That's how he put it, and I didn't doubt him for a second. James knew how to throw a good time. The house was located in a quiet neighborhood, a bit off the main road. It was a big place, old, but in that charming way. The windows were tall, and the front yard was overgrown with ivy. If I'm being honest, there was something about the place that felt off when we first pulled up. It wasn't the kind of place I would expect to see a party happening, but James assured me that it was his friend's house and that everything would be fine. As soon as we stepped inside, the first thing I noticed was how quiet it was. The music was low, but not the usual upbeat party stuff you hear blaring at most gatherings. This was different. Slow, heavy beats that seemed to make the air thick. The house was dimly lit, with only a few lamps casting shadows in the corners. The living room was packed with people, but there was an eerie quiet to the room. Everyone seemed to be talking in whispers, like they were all in on something I didn't know about. "Come on, you've got to check this out." James pulled me toward the back of the house, where the party seemed to be getting more intense. The kitchen was full of people, laughing too loud and drinking too much, but I still felt that uneasy sensation tugging at me. I shrugged it off, thinking it was just the nerves. Maybe I was overthinking things. We headed upstairs to what James called the real party. The second we stepped up the stairs, the air changed. It was colder, the walls felt closer, and the light from the hall seemed to flicker. But we kept going. James was already talking about some game they were playing upstairs, something about it being a tradition at these parties. I wasn't entirely sure what he meant, but he was grinning, so I followed him. At the top of the stairs was a long hallway, and at the end of it was a door that was slightly cracked open. James pushed it open and walked in without hesitation. I hesitated for a moment before following him inside. The room was different from everything I had seen downstairs. It was dark, with thick curtains drawn over the windows. The walls were covered in strange symbols, ones I didn't recognize but somehow felt familiar. A large table sat in the center of the room, with a few candles lit around it. There were a couple of chairs at the table, and in the middle of it was a strange object. At first I thought it was just a decoration, maybe something cool for the vibe of the party. But as I stepped closer, I saw it clearly. A black box about the size of a shoebox, carved with intricate patterns. "What is this?" I asked, my voice a little shaky. Something about it made my stomach turn. "It's just part of the game," James said, his voice unusually low, almost like he was trying to keep it a secret. "Don't worry about it. Everyone's been playing this for years." I looked around the room. There were a few people standing near the walls, watching us, but no one else was sitting at the table. It felt like they were waiting for something. "Come on, it'll be fun," James said, gesturing for me to sit down. "You can't leave without trying it." Against my better judgment, I sat down at the table. I looked around at the others, who were now gathering in a circle. They were watching me closely, their faces strangely blank, like they were all waiting for something to happen. "All right," James said. "Just touch the box, and everything will be fine. It's just a game." I hesitated for a second, but then with a deep breath I reached out and touched the box. The second my fingers made contact with it, I felt something cold shoot through my body. It wasn't just a physical chill. It felt like something inside me had shifted. The room around me started to warp, the walls stretching, the faces of the people around me beginning to blur. I pulled my hand back quickly, but the damage had already been done. "James," I said, my voice trembling. "What's happening?" The others in the room were staring at me now, their eyes wide with an expression I couldn't place. There was a sense of urgency in the air, but no one moved to help. James was standing at the head of the table, his eyes dark, a twisted grin on his face. "You shouldn't have touched it," he said quietly. "Now you're part of it. You're part of the game." I tried to get up, but my body felt heavy. I could barely move, like the air itself was holding me in place. The room started to spin, and before I knew it, I was falling forward, the cold darkness swallowing me whole. When I woke up, I was back in the living room, lying on the couch. My head was pounding and my hands were shaking. I had no idea how long I had been out, but when I looked around, the house was completely empty. The party was gone, and so was everyone who had been there. I checked my phone. It was nearly 4, and the street outside was quiet. No sign of any cars. The house was eerily still. I couldn't shake the feeling that something had happened while I was unconscious. Something that had changed everything. I left the house as quickly as I could, not bothering to try and find James or anyone else. I drove home in a daze, my mind racing, trying to piece together what had happened. But the more I thought about it, the more the memories began to blur. That box, the strange symbols, the people watching me. It all felt like a nightmare. The next day, I tried to reach James, but his phone went straight to voicemail. I messaged him, asking if he was okay, but there was no response. I never heard from him again. I don't know where he went or what happened to the party, but I know this much. That house, that game, it changed something inside me. Something I can't quite explain, but I know I'll never forget it. To this day, I don't know if I was the only one who felt it, but after that night, I could never look at parties the same way again.